this is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed human.
Wasabi is purpose-built to free your business from skyrocketing storage costs and fees. Wasabi is the go-to provider for professional and collegiate sports teams around the world. Check out Wasabi's AI-enabled intelligent media storage, Wasabi Air, to the industry's only cloud storage service with triple protection against cyber criminals. Wasabi, driving innovation in data storage for up to 80% less than market competition. Try for free at wasabi.com. Wasabi Hot Cloud Storage, proud partner of iHeart Podcast Network.
Hey, it's Haley Steinfeld. When everything requires your attention, it can be tough to figure out what to prioritize. But I'm here to talk to you about something that you should always put first, your breast health. In fact, if you're 40 and over, you should be getting screened once a year. And if you're under 40, it's never too soon to visit yourattentionplease.com to learn about your breast cancer risk. So go on, pay the girls some attention and take the time to find out your breast cancer risk at yourattentionplease.com. Trust me, your future self will thank you.
This is the Late Round Podcast with your host, JJ Zacharisa.
What's up, everyone? It's JJ Zacharisa, and in this episode 1081 of the Late Round Fantasy Football Podcast, thanks for tuning in. Before getting to the topic today, I just want to set another reminder that the Late Round Prospect Guide is currently available for pre-order. This year's guide lets you know everything that goes into the ZAP models. It's got profiles for every running back, wide receiver, and tight end going to the NFL Combine. And then there's also the year 2 profiles. I have my year 2 model for second year NFL players. And I've got a little over 30 profiles for running backs and wide receivers there too. So this thing is a beast. And you can pre-order it for $14.99. That's going to go up to $19.99 when the guide launches in mid-March. Just head to lateround.com to learn more. Today's an episode that I do each year as sort of an unofficial kickoff to my prospecting work. For those who are unfamiliar, I have a prospect model, or models, depending on how you want to frame it. That's what I just talked about at the top. I've worked on them for years, and I try to improve them every year with new data and new ways of calculating that data. I used to be pretty bad at modeling. Like, the first couple of iterations weren't that great in hindsight. But I've worked really hard over the last 7 or 8 years to get these models to a place where I'm confident in these results. And I know they bring value because I've tested them pretty thoroughly. With any model, you should be aiming to forecast something. And in the case of the ZAP models, at least at running back and wide receiver, I'm aiming to predict a player's best 2-season average in PPR points per game across their first 3 years in the league. I call that B2S, or best 2 seasons. Think of it this way. A player plays 15 games in each of his first 3 seasons. So he's hit a minimum game threshold. In year 1, he scores 11 PPR points per game. In year 2, it's 12. In year 3, that jumps up to 14. That player's B2S would be 13 PPR points per game, because it's taking his year 3 number of 14 and it's averaging that with his second highest output, which is 12 PPR points per game. That rookie season average just gets thrown out. I'm attempting to predict B2S for every running back and wide receiver who either goes to the combine or gets drafted. And I've got data that goes back to 2011 to help me do that. So the ZAP model database is filled with hundreds of running backs and wide receivers. Some players do slip through the cracks, like Austin Eckler, who wasn't at the combine or drafted. Adam Thielen, same exact deal. The models have a variety of inputs, ranging from a player's size to teammate score to production-related metrics. The production side is what we're going to be focused on today. Now, some people think collegiate production just doesn't matter when you're evaluating incoming prospects. And it might not matter at certain positions. I'm not analyzing linebackers and safeties here. But at running back and wide receiver, collegiate production matters, and it can matter a lot. Part of the reason people think production in college doesn't matter is because they just think in terms of raw production, yards, receptions, touchdowns. Those things can be really skewed in college given the variety of offenses and schemes that we see. One team might throw the ball 200 times in a season. Another team might throw it 700 times. That's not what these models really look at, though. The production metrics in the ZAP model, they're share related. That is, they're related to how a player performed within his own offense. We look at those kind of metrics all the time. Target share, touchdown share. The list goes on and on. On top of that, we can take those share-focused metrics and adjust them for things like age and program strength. A player giving us crazy production within his offense as a freshman is more likely going to be better than a player giving us that same production as a fifth-year senior. And if he does it at Alabama, that's more impressive than if he did it at Alabama State. Now, clearly, these models are being tested against what we've seen historically. And since these production metrics are predictive, that means players in the past at these positions share some similar traits. Turns out productive NFL players were almost always productive in college. Not all productive college players are then productive in the NFL. But if a player is dominating as a pro, he was probably dominating in college too. That brings me back to today's show. Every year is sort of a primer. I look at a sample of historical running backs and wide receivers who have been studs in the NFL. A stud sample, if you will. I find what model-related traits those guys have in common. And then I see if there are any players from this year's class who produce like them in college. I see if anyone in this year's class produced like an NFL stud. Today, we're talking running backs. Next week, we're going to go to wide receivers. Okay, let's get to the good stuff now. There's really no simple way to determine what an NFL running back stud is. Is it someone who gives us 16 PPR points per game in any season of his career? Is it someone who gives us multiple RB2 seasons across some portion of his career? What is it? My definition, just for purposes of the show and to make some sense of this class, is any running back since 2011 who had more than one season with 14 or more PPR points per game. That should obviously capture the studs like Christian McCaffrey, but it gives us a larger sample of players who may have been rock-solid RB2s for multiple years too. Not everyone in that sample is in the ZAP model database, so I can't compare their metrics to this year's class. But when those guys are all filtered out, it still gives me 39 running backs. 39 stud NFL running backs to compare this year's class to. So everyone's aware there are 20 running backs that were invited to this year's combine. Technically it's 21, but one's a very obvious and clear fullback. So we're removing him from the sample. The goal now is to compare their production profiles to the NFL stud sample and their production profiles, their collegiate production profiles. The running back model changed a bit year over year, but as usual, it's very receiving heavy. I've said this before, but that's likely due to a few things. Number one, receiving might just be a little bit undervalued in general. Draft capital is an input in the model, and that could be doing a lot of the heavy lifting for the rushing numbers. Number two, the model is building for PPR leagues, so receptions are going to matter a little bit more. And then number three, receiving's a talent signal. When a player has a wider skill set, that tells us he might be pretty talented. The three main production metrics that currently go into the running back ZAP model, they're prorated best season reception share, adjusted yards per team play, and adjusted receiving yards per team pass attempt. Reception share is simply running back receptions divided by total team receptions, the percentage of receptions that a running back had for his team. That's prorated for games played, and a player must have played at least 6 games in the season for that share to count. Next is adjusted yards per team play. This takes total yards by a running back, it divides it by the number of plays his team ran. The adjusted piece is a multiplier. It's adjusting for age and strength of schedule. So the younger a player, the harder the schedule, the larger that multiplier is going to be for total yards per team play. That exact same logic is used for receiving yards per team pass attempt, except with receiving yards per team pass attempt, you're looking at receiving yards per team pass attempt. This is a metric that I used last year in the model for running backs, but I did it in the form of breakout score. I'm now only using breakout score for wide receivers. More on that next week, though. Now, at this point in the show, someone's out there saying, get on with it, JJ. Just tell me who produced like a stud. Because look, it happens every single year. But folks, welcome to the Late Round Podcast. Process is the focus here. Anyway, let's look at that stud sample. When it came to prorated reception share in their best collegiate season, the stud sample averaged a 13.7% share. That actually was very similar to this year's class. But unfortunately, that's because of Eli Heidenreich. He's a running back out of Navy. Navy historically has a run-heavy offense, and that was no different this past year. They had just 106 completions all year, and Heidenreich caught 51 of those balls. He had a 48% reception share. That's absolutely breaking the model. Now, I've read that some people think that he might be a fullback, but who knows how a team's going to deploy that kind of player at the NFL level. But without his crazy reception share, the average in this class drops to 11.8%. And for the record, he's not the fullback that I was talking about earlier. But an 11.8% reception share for this year's class, that's not that bad. And just to be clear, I'm going to remove Heidenreich from the averages moving forward because he's really skewing this data. Now, when it comes to adjusted yards per team play, the stud sample is 2.12. This year's class, one that's not filled with studs, 1.60. Makes sense. And then lastly, with adjusted receiving yards per team pass attempt, it's 0.98 for the stud sample. With this year's combine invites, 0.70. Realistically, those numbers, all of those numbers, they're pretty good for this year's class. They're not that bad. Now, I think part of that is because we have fewer invites this year than most seasons. We might just be seeing better profiles in general going to the combine. There aren't many players weighing those numbers down. But it's going to be an interesting class to dissect here. Now, your next question might be, which players in this year's class actually produce like studs? Which players met or exceeded those averages across the board? We'll get to that in a second. First, let's run through some running backs with red flags within each category. And we probably have to start with Jadarian Price here. Everyone knows Jeremiah Love. They know that he's the top back in this year's class. And don't worry, we're going to get there. But Price was his backup. And when you're backing up a probable first-round pick, you're probably not going to get as much work in college. Your production profile is going to suffer. The ZAP model will almost definitely underrate Price. Just throwing it out there right now. It's a very unique situation. We don't see first-round backs with higher profile running back teammates usually drafted in the same year like this. And even though teammate score is an input in the model, it's not going to give Price enough of a boost to overcome the horrible production profile. Because look, it's a horrible production profile. Let me give you some context. Price has a 2.8% best season prorated reception share. If you go back and you look at the ZAP model database, there have been 47 running backs to enter the NFL with a best season reception share below 5%. So a decent bit below Price's. You want to guess how many of those backs had a single NFL season across their first 3 years in the league with 10 or more PPR points per game? Just take a wild guess. We're not even talking about like a season where a guy would be thrown into the flex. We're just talking about 10 PPR points per game.
This month, iHeartRadio is celebrating the stars of the 2026 Winter Games. Ocala, Florida might seem like an unlikely home for a Winter Olympian, but Erin Jackson is a sprinter in a league of her own. After making history as the first black woman to win an individual Winter Olympic gold medal, she returns to the ice faster than ever. A former inline skater, she dominates the 500-meter sprint with explosive power and arrives in Italy to defend her crown. For more Winter Games gold, search Olympics on the iHeartRadio app.
Innovation is what gets your business to the big leagues, and Wasabi is designed to give every business a shot at competition. Break free from skyrocketing storage costs and unpredictable egress fees from old and top-heavy legacy providers. Wasabi is the world's hottest cloud storage company and the go-to provider for professional and collegiate sports teams and leagues around the world, and here's why. Innovation. From Wasabi's AI-enabled intelligent media storage, Wasabi Air, to the industry's only cloud storage service with triple protection against cyber criminals, data deletion, and ransomware, Wasabi has taken the lead in big lead data storage. Remember, Wasabi is up to 80% less than market competition and doesn't charge a cent for businesses to access their own data. Wasabi, another championship story. Check them out for free at wasabi.com. Wasabi Hot Cloud Storage, proud partner of iHeart Podcast Network.
One of the 47. The one player scored 12.7 PPR points per game, and that came in year 3. And that player was Derrick Henry, the outlier of all outliers. People forget that Derrick Henry took a little bit of time to really be a huge fantasy producer at the NFL level. Now, I do think the circumstances here are naturally different compared to these other backs. There's no doubt. We can give him a little grace. But there's a likely chance that I'm going to be lower than the market with Price if he does go day 2, which NFLMockDraftDatabase.com believes that he definitely will. It's just too much of a projection for me because he profiles more as an early down guy with speed, and we want that full 3-down potential. Now, we actually have a lot of double-digit percentage reception share guys among the players projected to go relatively early in this year's draft. The only other call-out that I want to make here is probably Katron Allen out of Penn State. He topped out at a reception share of 8.6%, but I'm actually not overly concerned about that analytically for a couple of reasons. Number one, he saw an okay amount of looks through the air all 4 years at Penn State. He He even had a 7.4% reception share as a freshman. Number 2, he played with Nick Singleton. Singleton's a draft hopeful player himself this year. Now we can kind of move into the receiving yards per team pass attempt category from here, because I do think there's somewhat of a concern to call out here with Allen. He was not very effective when he saw those looks through the air. His age and schedule adjusted yards per team pass attempt ranks 7th worst in this year's class. Every running back who ranks worse than him is projected to go lower in the NFL draft, aside from Jadarian Price. Price, for the record, ranks worst. Now you could maybe call out Mike Washington here too. According to NFL Mock Draft Database, Washington, who's out of Arkansas, he's the 5th best back on the consensus board at this moment. He did hit an okay 12% reception share this past year, but when adjusted for age and schedule, his best season in receiving yards per team pass attempt was just 0.67. That was below average within this class. It's basically 2/3 of what we've seen from the stud sample. Now look, we've seen some hits in the past with receiving yards per team pass attempt numbers that low. I'm not overly concerned. One big one was Le'Veon Bell, and Washington was well above the class average in total yards per team play. That's good. He was at least getting things done on the ground as well. It's just the most notable player who was below average in receiving yards per team pass attempt aside from Allen and Price. Lastly is the metric I just referred to, which is total yards per team play. The stud sample averaged an adjusted total yards per team play rate of 2.12. This class only had 3 players above that 2.0 mark. So this is one area where we can dig in a little bit. Now, I could obviously call out Jadarian Price again. We played that out at this point. We know the production profile is not there for him. But let's talk about Seth McGowan out of Kentucky. He's barely projected to be in the top 200 right now, according to NFL Mock Draft Database. But there aren't many running backs projected to go that high in general. I want to bring him up because he has kind of a crazy profile. He's actually past his 25th birthday already, which, by the way, getting birthdays this year, a bigger pain in the butt than it's ever been. But that's for another day. McGowan played for Oklahoma, transferred to Butler Community College, played at New Mexico State, and then he finished things up at Kentucky. He started that journey all the way back in 2020. He was able to hit a 1.35 yards per team play rate at New Mexico State, but that was also New Mexico State. When adjusted for age and strength of schedule, his best mark in that category actually came this past year, and it was just 1.23. Now, we don't get a ton of day 3 hits in general at running back, but only Chris Carson and Tony Pollard were able to get to 14 or more PPR points per game within their first 3 years, with an adjusted yards per team play rate in their best season below 1.3. Carson was just a wild outlier from a college production standpoint. Pollard, though, he had a 15% reception share in college. He was a hybrid running back wide receiver. He's not the same kind of back whatsoever. So that's a red flag for McGowan. And speaking of Pollard, it's not super abnormal for receiving backs or players who are wide receivers for part of their collegiate career to score worse in total yards per team play, because they're just not seeing enough volume to score really high. We seem to have those guys each year. Brashard Smith was sort of that tweener profile last year. Tyrone Tracy was a converted wide receiver the year before that. This year, it looks like Adam Randall out of Clemson. Randall's adjusted total yards per team play was also at that 1.3 mark, but it was slightly higher than McGowan's. And Randall had a best season reception share of almost 12%. Randall's also a pretty unique evaluation because of his size. He's listed at 6'2", 235 at the moment. We'll see what the combine weigh-ins say, but that's wild for a player with a receiving backbone. So I'm not as worried about his yards per team play mark for all of those reasons. Now the question now becomes, do any of these players exceed that stud average in every single category? And the answer to that is yes, but it's not who you'd expect. There are 2 running backs I want to talk about here who missed out on the stud sample average across the board. They missed out on one of the 3 metrics, and they profile as pretty good backs. One of them is Jonah Coleman out of Washington. His receiving numbers are very solid. He had a 13.2% best season reception share. He had a receiving yards per team pass attempt, adjusted of course, of 1.1. That's 4th best in the class. He lacks a little bit in yards per team play, but he's a thick guy. He's listed at 5'9", 228. He looks like he could be a 3-down back. Jeremiah Love was the other player who actually missed on one of these categories. He had a 12.4% best season reception share. And then his adjusted yards per team play was 2.51. His adjusted yards per team pass attempt barely over the average at 0.99. but he was below in reception share. But look, Love looks like a very, very, very good prospect. I still want to see what these guys do at the combine, but his production profile does not have any glaring red flags. It's just not quite as good as some of the other running backs who have been drafted in round one over the last few years, according to the model. Bijan Robinson and Jahmyr Gibbs, they graded out higher than Love. And actually, Amarian Hampton does too. And then Genty, he was a better prospect last year. I would not say that's a problem. I have categories within the ZAP model, and right now, Jeremiah Love is in the elite producer category. He looks great. I'm just trying to give you guys some context as to where he stands versus other classes. To me, he's more of like an Amarian Hampton type prospect. Not play style, not archetype, but that's the kind of prospect he is as a scorer versus a Jahmyr Gibbs, a Bijan Robinson, and Ashton Genty. He's like one tier down from them. But he's really an awesome prospect. But like I said, because of Love's reception share being slightly below the NFL stud sample average, he didn't hit on all the marks. But one player did. One player was able to exceed the NFL stud sample across all three production metrics in the ZAP model. And that one player was Emmett Johnson out of Nebraska. The ZAP model absolutely loves Johnson. His top season in reception share, 19.2%. He had a best season adjusted yards per team play of 2.54. His top year in adjusted yards per team pass attempt was 1.13. Let's use baselines of 18% reception share, 2.4 total yards per team play, and 1.0 receiving yards per team pass attempt. Let's just filter out running backs in the ZAP model who were able to hit those marks like Emmett Johnson did. And to reiterate, he cleared those marks pretty easily. Here are the backs who have gotten to those marks in ZAP model history, which goes back to 2011. Deuce Vaughn and Tyler Bidet, okay, rough start. But then it's Todd Gurley, Ashton Genty, Christian McCaffrey, and Cam Scadaboo. Maybe this ends up being a Tyler Bidet situation. Deuce Vaughn is not the same archetype whatsoever. But Bidet went 196th overall in the draft. Emmett Johnson, he's projected to go in the top 100 right now. Another player who kind of fits this archetype is Aaron Jones. Just these ultra-productive running backs, even if it's just for 2 seasons. These ultra-productive running backs who are also really, really good receivers. You're not going to hit on all of them, but it is an archetype that we should pay attention to. So I'm very, very excited to see him go through this process and to see what film grinders say about him. The highlights that I've watched, I think he looks awesome, but I'm still very, very early in on this process. My overall sentiment with this exercise is that this running back class is just okay. There's some heat in there. There are some good players, but I don't think we're looking at anything close to last year where we could just go for days and days with really great profiles. Next week, we'll talk about wide receivers. That's it for today's show, though. Thanks to all of you for listening. If you yet subscribed to the Late Round Fantasy Football Podcast, make sure you are by searching for it pretty much anywhere podcasts can be found. And don't forget to follow me on Twitter and on Blue Sky at Late Round QB. Thanks for listening, everyone. Make sure you're tuning into the Late Round Fantasy Football Show on Wednesday over on YouTube. That's at noon Eastern. We're talking year 2 running backs. It's a running back week. And then I'll have a mailbag episode later in the week. Talk to you soon.
Wasabi is purpose-built to free your business from skyrocketing storage costs and fees. Wasabi is the go-to provider for professional and collegiate sports teams around the world. Check out Wasabi's AI-enabled intelligent media storage, Wasabi Air, to the industry's only cloud storage service with triple protection against cyber criminals. Wasabi, driving innovation in data storage for up to 80% less than market competition. Try for free at wasabi.com. Wasabi Hot Cloud Storage, proud partner of iHeart Podcast Network. Get almost anything you need delivered with Uber Eats. What do we mean by almost? Well, you can't get a well-groomed lawn delivered, but you can get a chicken parm delivered. A little escape? No. A delicious bowl of grapes? Yes, that. An afternoon stroll? Sorry, no. A burrito bowl? Happily, yes. A day of sunshine? No. A box of fine wines? Yes. Uber Eats can definitely get you that. Get almost anything delivered with Uber Eats. Order now. Alcohol in select markets. Product availability may vary by region. See app for details. Get almost anything delivered with Uber Eats. Order now.
This is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed human.